Nero Wolfe and the Weight of Loyalty. It was a Monday in October when death came wrapped in brown paper and tied with common twine. I say Monday because Wolfe was in particularly foul humor, his usual state for the first day of the week, when the Sunday papers had been read and discarded, when Fritz's Sunday roast was a memory, and when the long stretch to the weekend loomed like a prison sentence. He'd been up in the plant room since 9, brooding among his cattleyas, and when he descended at 11, his face had that set quality that meant I should speak only when spoken to, which lasted about 45 seconds, until I heard the commotion at the front door. The dogs heard it first. They always do. Caesar, the big Doberman, lifted his head from where he'd been lying near Wolfe's desk. His ears went forward, that clean, alert snap that precedes action. Mars, just slightly smaller but meaner, was already on his feet. Apollo trotted toward the hall, followed by Minerva with her measured, analytical gait. Diana, the smallest and fastest, was somehow already at the door before any of them. And Loyal, the brick-red pitbull with the white blaze and the notched ear, simply watched me from his spot by the window, waiting for my cue. That dog had more sense than most people I know. "Someone's at the door," I said unnecessarily, since the doorbell had just sounded. Wolfe grunted. He'd settled behind his desk with a book, some tome about Byzantine agriculture that only he could find fascinating. He didn't look up. I went to the hall and checked the security monitor, another of our recent additions after a certain incident involving a disgruntled former client and a firearm. The screen showed a courier, young, nervous, holding a package about the size of a manuscript box. Behind him, a delivery van idled at the curb. I opened the door 6 inches, the security chain still engaged. The dogs arranged themselves in their usual formation, Caesar at my left, Mars at my right, the others fanned behind. Only Loyal remained in the office. "Package for Nero Wolfe," the courier said. He was maybe 25, with the desperate look of someone working 3 gigs to make rent. No signature required, just delivery. "Who sent it?" "No return address. Paid cash at the depot. I just drop it off." I studied him. He was telling the truth. You can always tell when someone's lying about the small stuff. They oversell it. This kid just wanted to be done with his route. "Hold on." I closed the door, unchained it, and opened it fully. The dogs made no move forward. They knew the drill. I took the package, checked the label. It was addressed to Nero Wolfe, in careful old-fashioned handwriting. Heavy paper, good twine, professional. "Thanks," I told the courier, and closed the door before he could angle for a tip. Back in the office, I placed the package on Wolfe's desk. He ignored it with the dedication of a monk ignoring temptation. "It's for you," I said. "I can see that. Aren't you curious?" "No. No return address. Hand-delivered. Someone paid cash." "Then they are either eccentric or cautious. I am uninterested in both categories at present." I sat at my desk and looked at the package. The dogs had followed me in. Caesar approached the desk, sniffed once at the package, and returned to his spot. Mars did the same. Apollo barely glanced at it, but when Loyal rose and came over, he spent a full 30 seconds with his nose near the wrapping, his body very still. Then he looked at me. "Even the dog thinks it's interesting," I said. Wolfe turned a page. Loyal is a dog. He finds squirrels interesting. I do not open uninvited parcels on Mondays. "What day do you open them?" "Any day that is not Monday." I grinned. "So tomorrow?" He glared at me, which meant I'd won. With a theatrical sigh that would have done credit to a Shakespearean actor, he set down his book and gestured at the package with one finger. "Open it. But if it contains a request for services, you will compose a polite declination." I cut the twine with my pocket knife and unwrapped the paper. Inside was a box, and inside the box was a manuscript. The title page read, "The Weight of Loyalty, a novel by Jonathan Blackwood." Below that, in pencil, someone had written, "For Nero Wolfe, who understands the price of truth." I held up the title page. Wolfe's eyes narrowed, which meant his curiosity had beaten his Monday malaise. "Jonathan Blackwood," I said. "Isn't he dead?" Wolfe finished. 8 months ago, an apparent suicide in his cabin near Crooked Creek." The room got very quiet. Even the dogs seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. Loyal's ears were forward, watching both of us. Crooked Creek. That was where we'd found him. Found Loyal. I mean, that whole business with the cabin and the falls, and the body at the bottom. We'd closed that case, but it had stuck with us. Some cases do. We'd come back with the dog, and for the first time since I'd known him, Wolfe had allowed an animal not just to stay, but to become part of the family. The same Jonathan Blackwood, Wolfe said slowly, who was found dead with a typewriter beside him and a single word typed on the paper. Loyalty, I said. Indeed. I flipped through the manuscript. It was maybe 300 pages, typed on good paper, professional binding. The first chapter began. The thing about loyalty is that it cuts both ways, like a blade with no handle. Philosophical, I said. Read the rest of the first page. I did. It was good writing, clean, sharp, with an edge of menace. The story seemed to be about a writer who discovers his publisher has been stealing his ideas, and the elaborate revenge the writer plans. But there was something else underneath it, something that felt less like fiction and more like... It feels true, I said. Precisely, which means this manuscript is either a remarkable work of fiction or a confession disguised as one. Wolfe leaned back in his chair, his eyes half closed, and someone has gone to considerable trouble to ensure I receive it. The question is why. Maybe they want you to publish it. I am not a publisher, Archie. Maybe they want you to solve it. Solve what? A work of fiction? Solve what happened to Jonathan Blackwood. Wolfe was silent for a long moment. Then he reached forward and took the manuscript, his fingers careful on the pages. He read for 5 minutes straight while I waited. The dogs settled into their various spots. Caesar by the desk, Mars near the door, Apollo at the window, Minerva by the bookshelves, Diana on her favorite corner of the rug. Loyal remained near me, his dark eyes watchful. Finally, Wolfe set the manuscript down. There are real names in this, he said quietly. Real places, real events, thinly disguised. This is not entirely fiction. So someone wants you to investigate? Or someone wants to make sure certain truths remain hidden? He looked at me. File it. File it? You heard me. We have no client, no fee, and no reason to involve ourselves in the affairs of the dead. File it and forget it. I should have known better than to argue. When Wolfe gets that tone, the one that sounds like a door closing, you don't push. Not directly anyway. Sure, I said. I'll file it right after lunch. Now, Fritz is making crab cakes. That got him. Wolfe's love for Fritz's cooking is legendary, and crab cakes are high on his list of earthly pleasures. He waved a hand in defeat. After lunch, I put the manuscript in the safe, spun the dial, and tried not to think about the words written on that title page, for Nero Wolfe, who understands the price of truth. Whatever this was, it wasn't over. The trouble started 36 hours later, on Wednesday morning at 10:15. I was in the office sorting mail when the phone rang. I picked it up on the second ring. Nero Wolfe's office, Archie Goodwin speaking. Is this the detective? The voice was female, cultured, with an edge of controlled panic underneath. The one they call the genius? That depends on which detective you mean. If it's me, I'm flattered but inaccurate. If it's my boss, then yes, though he'd probably say the genius label is redundant. I need to see him. Today. Now, it's about Jonathan Blackwood. That got my attention. Your name? Lillian Ashford. I was Jonathan's literary agent, and his friend, and I think, she paused, I think I might be next. Next for what? To die. I glanced at Wolfe, who was reading his morning paper with the concentration of a scholar, deciphering ancient texts. The dogs were in their morning positions, Caesar and Mars by his feet, the others scattered throughout the room. Loyal was on the couch, watching me with those intelligent eyes. Can you be here at 11? I asked. Yes, thank you. You don't know what this means. No, I said, but I have a feeling I'm about to find out. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. That was. I heard. I have exceptional hearing, as you know. She says she might be next to die. An assumption unsupported by evidence. She was Jonathan Blackwood's agent, which proves only that she had a business relationship with a dead man. Half of New York could make that claim about someone. She sounds scared. Fear is not evidence. I leaned back in my chair. So we're not taking the case? We have no case to take. We have a manuscript of dubious origin, and a frightened woman who has yet to explain what she fears. Neither constitutes a retainer. Want to bet she shows up with a check? Wolfe's eyes narrowed. A gentleman does not bet on certainties. So you think she'll pay? I think, Wolfe said carefully, that anyone who sends me an anonymous manuscript followed by a terrified agent is either very desperate or very clever. Possibly both. We shall see which. At 11 sharp, the doorbell rang. The dogs assembled, their usual greeting protocol. I checked the monitor and saw a woman in her 50s, elegant in a grey suit, carrying a leather briefcase. Her face was drawn, her eyes darting to the street behind her as if expecting something terrible to emerge. I let her in. She flinched when she saw the dogs, then steadied herself. Caesar and Mars were impressive up close, 90 pounds of muscle and loyalty, with Mars showing teeth for exactly 1 second before returning to neutral. The others held back except for Loyal, who approached her slowly and sniffed once at her hand. She looked down at him, and something in her face softened. "You're the one," she said quietly, "from Crooked Creek. Jonathan wrote about you. The red dog with honest eyes." Loyal's tail moved once, a slow acknowledgement. "This way," I said, and led her to the office. Wolfe had risen when we entered, his gesture of respect for women, though he remained behind his desk. He'd put on his jacket, which meant he was taking this seriously. "Miss Ashford," he said, "please sit. Would you care for coffee? Beer?" "Coffee, thank you." She sat in the red leather chair, the good one, and set her briefcase on her lap. Her hands were shaking slightly. Loyal settled near her feet, which seemed to calm her. I went to the kitchen and got Fritz to prepare a tray. When I returned, Wolfe was studying her with that peculiar intensity he reserves for clients who interest him. "You sent the manuscript," he said. "It wasn't a question." She nodded. "I needed you to read it first, before I came, so you'd understand." "Understand what?" "That Jonathan didn't kill himself, that his death was murder, and that whoever killed him is working through a list." "A list?" "The manuscript isn't fiction, Mr. Wolfe. It's a map, a guide to everyone who betrayed him, and they're dying in order." Wolfe leaned back, his fingers interlaced over his middle mound. "Explain." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a newspaper clipping. 3 days ago, a man named Theodore Brennan was found dead in his Manhattan apartment. Apparent suicide. He'd typed a note on his typewriter. "The weight of guilt is heavier than the weight of truth." And Theodore Brennan was Jonathan's publisher, the one who rejected his last 3 manuscripts, the one who's described in Chapter 4 of the manuscript, thinly disguised as Thomas Brent, the publisher who steals his author's ideas and sells them to younger writers. Wolfe took the clipping and examined it. I watched his face, looking for the tells, the slight narrowing of the eyes, the almost imperceptible forward lean. They were there. "The manuscript," Wolfe said, "contains how many such characters?" 7, Lillian said. 7 people who Jonathan felt betrayed him. Theodore Brennan was number 4. And the first 3, dead. All within the last 8 months. All ruled accidents or suicides. The room got very quiet. Even the dogs seemed to sense the gravity of the moment. Caesar lifted his head, watching Wolfe. Mars's ears were forward. Loyal remained by Lillian's feet, a solid presence. "Names," Wolfe said. Lillian pulled out a typed list. Marcus Hale, Jonathan's first agent, who dropped him when sales declined. Died in a car accident 6 months ago. Grace Kimball, an editor who publicly trashed his last novel in a review, fell down her stairs 4 months ago. Patricia Delacourt, his ex-wife, who kept the rights to his early work. Heart attack 3 months ago, though she had no history of heart disease. And Theodore Brennan makes 4, I said. "Yes, which means 3 people remain." "Including you?" Wolfe said. Lillian met his gaze. "Including me, I'm number 6 in the manuscript. Lydia Anderson, the agent who loved him once but chose money over loyalty. Every word is true. I dropped Jonathan as a client 2 years ago because his books weren't selling. I told myself it was business, but he saw it as betrayal." "And who are 5 and 7? Wolfe asked. She hesitated. 5 is Randall Pierce, Jonathan's former best friend and writing partner. In the manuscript, he's Richard Pierce, the colleague who stole Jonathan's plot ideas. He lives in Connecticut now, and I called him yesterday to warn him. He laughed at me, said I was being hysterical. And 7. 7 is the worst one, the one Jonathan called the Judas. I don't know who it is. The manuscript describes them only as the one who knew all the secrets and sold them for 30 pieces of recognition. Jonathan coded that character so carefully that I can't identify them. Wolfe was silent for a long moment, his eyes half closed. I knew that look. He was arranging facts like chess pieces, looking for the pattern. You believe, he said finally, that someone is murdering people based on a manuscript written by a dead man? Yes. And you believe this because 4 people have died in ways that might be connected to their treatment of Jonathan Blackwood. When you say it like that, it sounds crazy. It sounds like either an extraordinary coincidence or an extraordinary crime. The distinction matters. Wolfe opened his eyes. What do the police say? They say I'm a grieving friend who's seeing patterns where none exist. They say 4 deaths over 8 months, all ruled accidents or suicides, do not constitute a serial murder case. They may be correct. They're not. Lillian's voice was steel. I knew Jonathan. I knew how his mind worked. This manuscript was his revenge, his legacy, and someone is executing it, literally. Why send it to me? Because you understand loyalty. You understand what it means to betray someone, and what it costs. And because, she paused, because Jonathan mentioned you once. We were drinking, late one night, and he told me about Crooked Creek, about the cabin, about the dog he couldn't save. He said if I ever need truth to be found, I'd hire Nero Wolfe. He's the only one who doesn't lie to himself. Wolfe's expression didn't change, but I saw his hand move slightly toward where Loyal lay. The dog's ears perked up, as if he'd heard his own story being told. Your fee, Wolfe said, is $20,000 as a retainer. You will pay it now, and you will tell me everything about Jonathan Blackwood, his manuscript, and every person on that list. If you withhold information, I will terminate our arrangement immediately. Agreed? Lillian opened her purse without hesitation and pulled out a checkbook. Agreed. After Lillian Ashford left $20,000 poorer, but considerably less terrified, Wolfe sat in silence for a full 10 minutes. I'd seen him do this before, usually before making a pronouncement that would unravel an entire case. But this time, something was different. He wasn't just thinking. He was troubled. What is it? I finally asked. The manuscript. He gestured toward the safe where I'd stored it. Retrieve it, please. I got it out and brought it to his desk. He opened it to a page he'd marked earlier, chapter 6 I saw, and read aloud. The thing about revenge is that it requires commitment. Not the hot anger of the moment, but the cold patience of years. You must be willing to wait, to watch, to become someone else entirely, if that's what it takes. The best revenge is the kind where your enemy never sees you coming, because you've already moved past their comprehension. You've become the ghost in their machine, the whisper in their nightmares, and when they finally understand what's happening, it's too late. The trap has already closed. He set the manuscript down. That was written by a man who planned his revenge with extraordinary care. But Jonathan Blackwood is dead, so who is executing this plan? Someone who loved him? I suggested. Someone who thinks they're honoring his memory? Or someone who's using his manuscript as cover for their own murders? Wolfe shook his head. The answer lies not in the manuscript itself, but in the man who wrote it. You will go to Connecticut today, Archie. Visit Randall Pierce, number 5 on the list. Learn everything you can about Jonathan Blackwood's state of mind before he died. And if Pierce is the next victim, then your visit may save his life, or it may accelerate the timeline. Either way, we'll learn something valuable. I stood up. What will you do? I will read this entire manuscript, every word. If it's truly a map to murder, then somewhere in these pages is a clue to the cartographer, and I will find it. I drove north in my sedan with Loyal beside me in the passenger seat. Wolfe had insisted the dog come along. His exact words were, "Loyal knew Blackwood. Dogs remember. Take him." So there we were, heading up the Merritt Parkway on a Wednesday afternoon, with fall colors blazing around us and murder on my mind. Loyal sat calmly, watching the scenery pass, occasionally glancing at me as if checking that I was still sane. "Some case, huh?" I said to him. "Dead writer, mysterious manuscript, people dropping like flies, and we're supposed to figure it out based on loyalty. Your namesake. Loyal's tail thumped once against the seat. Randall Pierce lived in a colonial house in Westport, the kind of place that screams, I wrote one successful novel and parlayed it into consulting gigs and teaching positions. The lawn was immaculate, the shutters freshly painted, the driveway made of stones that probably cost more than my car. I rang the doorbell. Loyal sat at my heel, perfect canine gentleman. The door opened to reveal a man in his 60s, trim and tan, wearing khakis and a polo shirt that probably cost $300. His face had that smooth, practiced look of someone who's never had a truly bad day in his life. Yes, he said, eyeing me with the wariness of a man who gets a lot of salesmen. Randall Pierce. Who's asking? Archie Goodwin. I work for Nero Wolfe. We're investigating the deaths of several people connected to Jonathan Blackwood. His face went through several expressions: surprise, confusion, and then settling on irritation. I told that woman, Lillian, that she was being paranoid. There's no connection between those deaths. And frankly, I don't appreciate being dragged into her conspiracy theories. Mr. Pierce, 4 people are dead. All of them connected to Blackwood. All of them within 8 months. You're number 5 on a very specific list. I'd think you'd want to take that seriously. It's a coincidence. 4 deaths is a lot of coincidences. Jonathan was troubled. Everyone around him was troubled. That's the common thread, Mr. Goodwin. Not some elaborate murder plot from beyond the grave. Now, if you'll excuse me. Loyal growled. It was low, barely audible, but it stopped Pierce mid-sentence. The dog was staring at something behind Pierce, into the house. What's your dog's problem? Pierce snapped. I don't know. He's usually very calm. I looked past Pierce into the dim hallway. Is someone else here? No. I live alone. Then why did you say, excuse me, like you were about to close the door on an interruption? Pierce's face flushed. I don't have to talk to you. No, you don't. But I'd think a man whose friends are dying would want all the help he can get, unless you know something that makes you feel safe. For just a moment, something flickered across his face. Fear, real, genuine fear. Then it was gone, replaced by that smooth mask. I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I have a security system, I'm careful, and I don't believe in ghost stories. Good day, Mr. Goodwin. He closed the door firmly. I heard the deadbolt slide into place. I looked down at Loyal. What did you smell in there, boy? The dog whined softly, still staring at the closed door. Something was wrong in that house. Something that made a normally calm pitbull uncomfortable. I walked back to the car, but instead of leaving, I drove around the block and parked where I had a view of Pierce's house. Loyal settled in next to me, still alert. We'll wait a bit, I told him, see what happens. An hour later, I saw why Loyal had reacted. A car pulled into Pierce's driveway. A black sedan, expensive with tinted windows. A woman got out, late 30s, dressed in business casual, carrying a briefcase. She didn't ring the doorbell. She used a key. I snapped a photo with my phone as she entered the house. Then I called Saul Panzer, Wolfe's best operative, and gave him the license plate number. Find out who owns that car, I said, and everything about them. Call me as soon as you have something. On it, Saul said, and hung up. I waited another 30 minutes. The woman didn't come out. Loyal had relaxed slightly, but he was still watchful. My phone rang. Saul. The car is registered to a Dr. Helen Vance, he said. Psychiatrist. Has a practice in Manhattan. Very expensive. Very exclusive clientele. Want me to dig deeper. How exclusive? Let me put it this way. Her patient list reads like a who's who of New York publishing. Editors, agents, writers, the literary therapy crowd. Was Jonathan Blackwood one of her patients? Checking. Yes. From about 3 years ago until 6 months before his death. I felt something click into place. What about Randall Pierce? Current patient. Weekly appointments. Has been for 2 years. Saul, you're a genius. Tell that to my bank account. You want surveillance on Dr. Vance? Not yet. Just keep her on your radar. I'm heading back to the city. I hung up and looked at Loyal. The plot thickens, as they say. Our friend Pierce is lying about living alone, has a psychiatrist who knew Blackwood, and is scared enough to need weekly therapy but not scared enough to talk to us. What do you make of that?" Loyal's tail thumped once. In dog language, that probably meant, "Let's go home." Smart dog. I got back to the brownstone at 6, just as Wolfe was descending from the plant rooms. Fritz had dinner ready, a magnificent pot roast with root vegetables, and the house smelled like heaven. The dogs assembled in their evening positions. Caesar near Wolfe's chair, Mars by the door, Apollo at his window post, Minerva by the bookshelves, Diana on the rug, and Loyal beside me. Over dinner, I reported everything. Wolfe ate steadily, pausing only to digest information along with Fritz's excellent cooking. When I got to the part about Dr. Helen Vance, his fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "A psychiatrist," he said slowly. "Who treated both Blackwood and Pierce? And who has a key to Pierce's house? Professional or personal?" The way Pierce reacted when I mentioned being alone, personal. But she was carrying a briefcase, which suggests professional. Maybe both. Wolfe finished his bite and dabbed his mouth with his napkin. A psychiatrist would know her patients' deepest fears, their secrets, their weaknesses, and how to exploit them. Precisely. Wolfe pushed his plate away slightly, his signal that thinking had overtaken appetite. A therapist hears confessions. A skilled therapist could identify who betrayed Jonathan Blackwood, even before reading the manuscript. She would know the players, the relationships, the resentments. You think she's the killer? I think she's either the killer, the next victim, or the only person who truly understood Jonathan Blackwood's mind. Any of those possibilities merits investigation. He looked at me. "Tomorrow, you will call Dr. Vance's office and make an appointment. For therapy. Don't be absurd. You're emotionally stable to the point of being irritating. No, you will tell her that you're investigating Jonathan Blackwood's death, and you have questions about his treatment. If she's legitimate, she'll cite doctor-patient confidentiality and refuse. If she's not, she'll be curious enough to talk." "Exactly." I grinned. "And what will you be doing while I'm being rejected by a psychiatrist?" "Reading the rest of the manuscript and having a conversation with Inspector Kramer." That surprised me. "You're bringing in the law." "I'm determining whether the law is already involved. If 4 deaths have occurred as Miss Ashford claims, the police must have noticed some pattern, even if they've dismissed it. Kramer is methodical. He keeps files, and he owes me a favor." "Since when?" "Since I solved the Delmonico case without claiming credit. He knows it. I know it. And when I remind him of it, he'll share what he has on these deaths." "You're being very thorough." "I'm being very cautious. This case has an unusual quality, Archie. It feels," he paused, searching for the word, "orchestrated. As if someone has planned not just the murders, but our investigation of them." "You think we're being manipulated?" "I think someone sent me that manuscript for a reason. Either they want me to stop the murders, or they want me to witness them. I haven't decided which." Before I could respond, the doorbell rang. The dogs went on alert, but it was a familiar pattern, Caesar and Mars to attention, the others watchful but calm. When I checked the monitor, I understood why. Inspector Kramer was at our door, looking even more irritated than usual. I let him in. He brushed past me without a greeting, the dogs parting to let him through. They knew him well by now, had for years, and there was no threat display. Caesar even gave his leg a brief sniff before returning to position. "Evening, Inspector," I said cheerfully. "Care for some pot roast? Fritz made extra." "I'm not here for dinner." Kramer stomped into the office where Wolfe sat, still at his desk. "I'm here because I've got 4 unsolved deaths, a hysterical literary agent claiming they're murders, and now you're involved, which means this is about to get complicated." Wolfe raised an eyebrow. "Please sit, Inspector, and do calm down. Your blood pressure is not my responsibility, but I'd prefer not to witness a stroke in my office." Kramer sat with the heavy grace of a man who'd had a long day. "Talk to me, Wolfe. What's your interest in Jonathan Blackwood?" "A client's concern that the deaths surrounding him are not coincidental. They're not murders." "You sound certain." "I am certain. We've investigated. Hale's car crash was an accident. Bad brakes, no evidence of tampering. Kimball's fall was an accident. She was drinking, missed a step. Delacourte's heart attack was natural causes, coroner confirmed. And Brennan's suicide was exactly that. Suicide. He left a note, for God's sake. A typed note, Wolfe said. So what? Some people type. It's not suspicious. And the phrase in the note, the weight of guilt is heavier than the weight of truth. That doesn't strike you as unusual? Kramer shrugged. Suicidal people say unusual things, that's what makes them suicidal. Did you know that Jonathan Blackwood was also found with a typed note? One word: loyalty. Yes. Another suicide. What's your point? My point is that someone is leaving breadcrumbs, Inspector, and you're ignoring them because they don't fit the pattern you expect. Kramer's face reddened. I've been a cop for 30 years, Wolfe. I know the difference between a murder and an accident, and I know when someone's trying to create a pattern where none exists. He stood up. If you've got evidence of a crime, real evidence, not literary analysis, bring it to me. Otherwise, stay out of my investigation. You just said there was no investigation. There isn't. But if you make one necessary, I'll be forced to conduct it, and I prefer not to waste my time on wild theories from worried agents and armchair detectives. He left without waiting for a response. I heard the front door close behind him, heard his footsteps on the stoop. The dogs had remained calm throughout. Even Mars, who occasionally took a dislike to visitors, had merely watched with professional interest. Well, I said, that went well. Remarkably well, Wolfe said. He confirmed that there are 4 deaths, that they've been investigated, and that no evidence of foul play was found, which means our killer, if there is a killer, is extraordinarily skilled. Or lucky. Luck doesn't kill 4 people in ways that appear accidental or self-inflicted. Luck is random. This is deliberate. He reached for the manuscript and opened it to a page near the middle. Listen to this passage from chapter 9. The secret to any successful plan is understanding your audience. Not your victims, your audience. The ones who will investigate, who will question, who will ultimately judge. You must craft your narrative for them. Make them see what you want them to see. Make them believe what you need them to believe. And most importantly, make them complicit in their own blindness. Give them just enough truth to satisfy their need for order, and they'll overlook the chaos you've created. He closed the manuscript. Jonathan Blackwood was teaching someone how to commit murder and make it invisible, and that someone learned the lesson well. I felt a chill run down my spine. So we're not just investigating murders, we're investigating a student putting their teacher's theory into practice. A disturbing way to phrase it, but accurate. Which means Dr. Vance is looking more and more interesting. If anyone learned Blackwood's lessons, it would be someone he confided in regularly. Perhaps, or perhaps she's merely another player in a game we don't yet understand. Tomorrow will tell us more. Wolfe stood up, which meant the evening's work was done. Fritz has prepared apple tart. We should eat it while contemplating the nature of loyalty, both the virtue and the vice. Thursday morning brought rain and a phone call that changed everything. I was in the office at 9, coffee in hand, preparing to call Dr. Vance's office when my phone buzzed. The number was unfamiliar, but something made me answer. Goodwin. Mr. Goodwin, this is Detective Morris, Connecticut State Police. I'm calling about Randall Pierce. My stomach dropped. What about him? He's dead. Apparent suicide. Hanged himself in his study sometime last night. I'm at the scene now, and I found your business card in his pocket. Want to tell me why? I looked at Wolfe, who had just entered the office. His face was impassive, but I saw his eyes sharpen. I visited him yesterday afternoon. I was investigating a case that might involve him. What kind of case? The kind where people are dying in suspicious circumstances. I warned him he might be in danger. Well, you were right about that. How soon can you get up here? 2 hours. Make it 90 minutes. The body's being moved at 11:30, and you'll want to see this before that happens. He gave me the address, Pierce's house, and hung up. Wolfe was already reaching for his jacket. I'm coming with you. I stared at him. Nero Wolfe doesn't leave the brownstone. It's one of his defining characteristics, right up there with genius and beer consumption. He has agoraphobia, germophobia, and general phobia about anywhere that isn't his controlled environment. You're serious? 5 people are dead, Archie. 5. The pattern is accelerating. And if I'm correct in my theory, the next death will be Miss Ashford, followed by the mysterious 7th person. We are running out of time. He looked toward the hallway where Fritz was surely listening. Fritz, prepare the travel bags. We're going to Connecticut. And notify Saul. I want him at the brownstone while we're gone. All of us? I asked. All of us. You, me, Fritz, and the dogs. If this killer is as skilled as I believe, the brownstone itself may be a target. Better to be mobile and unpredictable. 30 minutes later, we were loading into my sedan and Saul's larger SUV. Wolfe and I took my car with Caesar, Mars, and Loyal. Fritz drove Saul's vehicle with Apollo, Minerva, and Diana. It was like a military convoy, except with more pedigree and better manners. Wolfe was silent for most of the drive. His bulk settled into the passenger seat with remarkable resignation. He was making a sacrifice, leaving his sanctuary, and I knew better than to make it worse with conversation. Caesar sat behind him, alert. Mars was behind me, and Loyal was in the back middle, watching through the windshield like a co-pilot. We arrived at Pierce's house to find police cars, an ambulance, and that particular organized chaos that surrounds sudden death. Detective Morris met us at the curb, a lean man in his 40s with tired eyes and the wariness of someone who's seen too much. "Mr. Wolfe, I've heard of you. Didn't expect you to actually come up here." "Circumstances demanded it," Wolfe said, extricating himself from the car with dignity despite the physics involved. "Show us everything." Morris led us into the house. The dogs stayed with Fritz in the SUV, Wolfe's orders. The scene wasn't appropriate for them, he'd said, though I suspected he meant he needed them calm and observant for later. Pierce's study was on the second floor, a wood-paneled room lined with books that probably hadn't been read in years. The body was gone, but the rope still hung from the exposed beam, and the overturned chair lay on its side. "Forensics cleared the scene an hour ago," Morris said. "Everything points to suicide. Note typed on his computer, time to send this morning. Door locked from the inside. No signs of struggle." "What did the note say?" Wolfe asked. Morris pulled out his phone and read, "The weight of complicity is heavier than the weight of action. I can't carry it anymore. Forgive me. R.P." I looked at Wolfe. His face was stone, but I saw the flicker in his eyes. Another quote about weight. Another typed note. Another perfect staging. "The computer," Wolfe said. "May I see it?" Morris hesitated. "It's evidence. And I'm consulting on a case that involves this death. You called me here, detective. Let me help you." Something in Wolfe's tone must have convinced him. Morris led us to the desk where a laptop sat open. Wolfe leaned over it, his hands careful not to touch anything. His eyes scanned the screen, the desktop, the file structure. "The note was typed this morning at 7:43, Morris said. "Time to send at 8. We figure he wrote it, set it to send, and then he gestured at the rope. And you found no prints other than his own?" "Correct. No signs of anyone else in the house. No evidence of forced entry. All windows and doors locked from inside." "What about the psychiatrist?" I asked. "Dr. Helen Vance. She was here yesterday afternoon." Morris's eyes narrowed. "How do you know that?" "I was parked outside, watching. She used a key to enter. She was here for at least 30 minutes. Romantic relationship? Possibly, or she was treating him here. Either way, she was in the house less than 24 hours before he died." Morris pulled out his notebook. "I'll need to talk to her. You have contact information?" I gave him everything Saul had found. Morris made notes, then looked at Wolfe. "You think this wasn't suicide?" "I think," Wolfe said carefully, "that this was exactly what it appears to be, which is precisely why I don't believe it. Show me the rest of the house." We walked through every room. Pierce had lived well, expensive furniture, good art, a wine cellar that Wolfe examined with professional interest. But it was in the kitchen that Wolfe stopped. "This," he said, pointing at a wine glass in the sink. "Has this been tested?" "For what?" "Sedatives, drugs, anything that might have impaired Mr. Pierce's judgment or made him more susceptible to suggestion." Morris frowned. "You think someone drugged him?" "I think someone with psychiatric training would know exactly what substances could make a person compliant, suggestible, or unable to resist. And I think a woman with a key to this house and access to prescription medications would have both means and opportunity." Morris looked at the glass. "I'll have it tested, but even if there's something in it that doesn't prove murder, he could have taken something himself." "He could have," Wolfe agreed, "but then we're left with an interesting question. Why would a man who was taking sedatives to calm himself then hang himself? Sedatives reduce agitation. They make one less likely to take violent action, not more. The logic hit Morris like a punch. He stared at Wolfe with new respect. You're saying if he was drugged it was to make him compliant while someone else staged the suicide. I'm saying it's a theory worth investigating. Now I'd like to see the note on the computer screen more carefully. With your permission. We returned to the study. Wolfe settled into Pierce's chair. A sacrifice, since he hates sitting in chairs others have used, and studied the computer with the intensity he usually reserves for orchid breeding schedules. The note was written in Microsoft Word, he said. Default settings. No formatting changes, no editing marks, no revision history. It was written in one sitting, perfectly formed, with no errors or corrections. So, Morris said. So Mr. Pierce was a writer, a professional. And professional writers do not compose perfect final drafts. They edit. They revise. They leave tracks of their process. This note has none of that. It reads like something written by someone who knew what they wanted to say and said it without hesitation. Maybe he'd been planning it for a while. Perhaps. Or perhaps someone else wrote it who knew exactly what to say. Wolfe stood up. Detective Morris, I recommend you interview Dr. Helen Vance immediately. If she treated Mr. Pierce, she can tell you his state of mind. If she had a romantic relationship with him, she can tell you whether this suicide makes sense. And if she's involved in his death, as I suspect she is, you'll see it in her reaction to your questions. You think a psychiatrist is killing people? I think a psychiatrist would be ideally positioned to do exactly what's been done here. Identify victims, access their homes, gain their trust, and stage deaths that appear self-inflicted. I also think that if I'm correct, Miss Lillian Ashford is in immediate danger. Morris pulled out his phone. I'll send officers to check on her. Do better than that, Wolfe said. Bring her here, to Connecticut. Put her in protective custody. If the pattern holds, she dies next, and I don't intend to let that happen. We left Connecticut at noon, but instead of returning to Manhattan, Wolfe directed me north and west, toward the hills. I didn't ask why. When Wolfe gets that particular expression, the one that says he's 3 moves ahead in a chess game only he can see, you just drive and wait for enlightenment. Fritz followed in the SUV with the dogs. We drove for 90 minutes through increasingly rural countryside, fall colors blazing on the hillsides, until we reached a town I recognized with a jolt, Crooked Creek. Why are we here? I asked. Because Jonathan Blackwood died here. And if we're to understand the pattern of these murders, we must first understand the man who inspired them. You think the answers are at his cabin? I think the answers are in the place where loyalty was both lost and found. He glanced back at where Loyal sat in the rear seat, the dog's eyes watchful. We found him here. Perhaps he can help us find the truth. We drove through the small town, barely more than a main street with a general store, post office and diner, and continued up into the hills. I remembered the route from our last visit, 8 months ago. The case that had brought us here then had been closed, solved, the guilty party identified and arrested. But we'd left with more questions than answers about Jonathan Blackwood himself. The cabin sat exactly as I remembered it, a weathered structure perched above a waterfall, surrounded by pine trees, and accessible only by a narrow dirt road. Crime scene tape still clung to the porch railing, faded and torn by weather. We parked, and I let the dogs out. They ranged around the clearing, sniffing and exploring, except for Loyal. He went directly to the cabin and sat on the porch, looking at the door. Wolfe approached slowly, his eyes taking in every detail. When we found him, he said quietly, Blackwood had been dead for approximately 12 hours. Cause of death was ruled suicide, a gunshot to the head. The weapon was found beside him, and the typed note said simply, loyalty. Single word, I said, like he was labeling something, or naming it, or claiming it as his final truth. Wolfe mounted the porch steps, and I noticed he moved carefully, respectfully, as if approaching a grave. The local police investigated, found nothing suspicious, and closed the case. But we knew even then that something was incomplete about it. We found Loyal wandering in the woods the next day, I said, about a mile from here, hungry, scared but uninjured. And he led us back to this cabin, led us to discover details the police had missed. Wolfe tried the door. It was unlocked. No one locks doors in places like this, even after death. He pushed it open. The interior was exactly as we'd left it. Dusty, cold, with furniture covered in sheets and the faint smell of abandonment. But there was also something else, that particular quality spaces have when something significant happened in them. The air felt heavy. Loyal entered ahead of us, moving with purpose to a corner near the fireplace. He sat there, looking up at something on the wall. I followed his gaze and saw what he was focused on, a framed photograph. It showed a younger Jonathan Blackwood, maybe in his 40s, with a woman and a dog. The dog was a pitbull, red-coated with a white blaze. It could have been Loyal's twin. His dog, Wolfe said softly. The one he wrote about in his early stories. Justice, he called him. I stared at the photograph. You think Loyal is related to that dog? I think Loyal is that dog's descendant. And I think Jonathan Blackwood came back to this place looking for something he'd lost, a connection to a time when loyalty meant something simple and pure, before the betrayals, before the bitterness. Fritz had entered behind us, and he now moved through the cabin with the instincts of a man who maintains spaces for a living. He went to the kitchen, examined the stove, checked the pantry. "Mr. Wolfe," he called, "there is food here. Canned goods, coffee, bread that has molded but was fresh perhaps 9 months ago. And there are dog bowls, 2 of them. 2. I went to look. Fritz was right. 2 stainless steel bowls sat in the corner of the kitchen. Both showed signs of recent use before being abandoned. He was feeding 2 dogs, I said. Which means Loyal was not alone when Blackwood died. Wolfe finished. There was another dog here, and that dog is now missing. We searched the cabin thoroughly. In the bedroom we found Blackwood's writing desk, an old oak piece with drawers full of papers. Wolfe sat down and began going through them with methodical care. I watched as he pulled out manuscript pages, letters, notes, photographs. His correspondence, Wolfe said, holding up a stack of letters, all addressed to him, dated over the last 3 years, and look at the return addresses. I read them over his shoulder. Lillian Ashford, Theodore Brennan, Randall Pierce, Grace Kimball, Patricia Delacorte, Marcus Hale, all the people on the list. All the people who were now dead except Lillian. He kept their letters, I said. Every rejection, every criticism, every betrayal documented and filed. Not just filed, studied. Wolfe opened one letter from Theodore Brennan, the publisher who died first on the list. It was a form rejection, cold and impersonal, but in the margins, Blackwood had written notes in pencil, lied about reading the full manuscript. His assistant said he only read 3 chapters. He's lazy, unworthy, a betrayer of art. This is how he built his list, I said. Each letter, each interaction, documented and analyzed. He was building a case against them. More than that, he was building a justification. Wolfe pulled out another drawer and found what he was looking for, a leather-bound journal, thick with entries. He opened it to a random page and read aloud. October 15th. Received another rejection from Brennan today. He says the market isn't right for my work. What he means is that he's too cowardly to take a risk on real literature. He wants formulaic trash that sells in airports. He's forgotten what publishing is supposed to be about. Truth, beauty, meaning. He's become what I most despise, a merchant, not a guardian. The weight of his betrayal is heavier than he knows. The weight, I said. He was already using that phrase. It's his theme, his obsession, the weight of betrayal, the weight of loyalty, the weight of truth. Everything in his worldview came down to burden and balance. Wolfe flipped forward several pages. And here, listen to this entry from December. I've decided to write it all down. Not as memoir, that's too self-indulgent, but as fiction, a novel where every character is a portrait of someone who betrayed me. I'll call it The Weight of Loyalty, and in it, I'll show them what they really are. Their cowardice, their greed, their casual cruelty, and someday someone will read it and understand. He was planning the manuscript months before he died, I said. Yes, but here's the crucial question. Did he plan only to write it, or did he plan what would happen after? Wolfe flipped to the final entries, dated just days before Blackwood's death. January 20th. The manuscript is finished. Every word is true, though none of it happened. That's the power of fiction. You can tell the truth by lying beautifully. I've hidden the evidence in plain sight. The map is drawn. Now I just need someone to follow it. January 21st. I've decided what comes next. There's a detective in New York, Nero Wolfe. Brilliant man. Solved that Crooked Creek case with the kind of integrity that's rare these days. If anyone can understand what I've done, it will be him. I'll make sure he gets the manuscript. He'll know what to do. January 22nd. The dogs know something is wrong. Justice and Loyal both sense it. They keep watching me, waiting. I wish I could explain to them that what I'm doing is necessary, that some truths require sacrifice, but they wouldn't understand. Dogs only know loyalty, not the complications that come with it. Wolfe stopped reading. His hand was trembling slightly, something I'd never seen before. He looked at Loyal, who had remained by the fireplace, patient and watchful. He planned his own death, I said quietly, and he planned for you to investigate it. Not just investigate, execute. He left me the manuscript as a map, knowing that by following it, I would uncover the murders. But here's what troubles me. Wolfe stood up, the journal still in his hands. He mentions 2 dogs, Justice and Loyal, but when we found the cabin 8 months ago, there was only 1 dog outside, Loyal. Where was Justice? Maybe Justice ran off. Dogs don't abandon their pack, not without reason. Wolfe walked to the fireplace where Loyal sat. He knelt down, another unprecedented action, and looked the dog in the eyes. You were here. You saw what happened. If only you could tell us. Loyal's tail thumped once on the floor. Then he stood, walked to the back door of the cabin, and scratched at it. He wants out, I said. Then let's follow him. I opened the door, and Loyal bolted into the woods. Not running away, running toward something. Wolfe and I followed, with Fritz bringing up the rear. The other dogs joined the pursuit, ranging through the trees with professional efficiency. Loyal led us down a slope, through dense underbrush, toward the sound of falling water. The waterfall, the same one that had been key to our last case here. At the base of the falls, Loyal stopped and began digging at a spot near the rocks. Caesar and Mars immediately joined him, their powerful paws making quick work of the soft earth. Within minutes they'd uncovered something. A collar, leather weathered, with a brass nameplate that read, Justice, and beside it, partially covered by stones, the bones of a large dog. Wolfe stared at the grave in silence. I felt something heavy settle in my chest, a weight, ironically, of understanding what had happened here. Blackwood buried his dog, I said, the first Loyal, the one he'd had for years. Justice died, Wolfe said quietly, and Blackwood came here to bury him, in the place where he'd once been happy, in the place where loyalty still meant something pure. He looked at our Loyal, who stood beside the grave with his head lowered, and then he found you, wandering, lost, so similar to the dog he'd just buried. He took you in, kept you for his final days, named you after the thing he valued most. And then he killed himself, I said. But first he made sure you would survive. He left food and water for you, made sure you could get out of the cabin, knew you'd be found. He saved the dog even as he condemned himself. Wolfe's voice was rough with emotion. That was his final act of loyalty, making sure that one innocent thing would survive his despair. We stood there for a long moment, the sound of falling water filling the silence. The other dogs had gathered around us, a circle of quiet witnesses. Then Wolfe straightened. We need to return to New York, now, because I finally understand what's happening, and if I'm right, Lillian Ashford is in more danger than we realized. What do you mean? Jonathan Blackwood didn't write a murder manual, Archie. He wrote a confession, and someone is using it to finish what he started, not to honor him, but to destroy what he loved most. He turned and walked back toward the cabin, moving faster than I'd seen him move in years. I gathered the dogs and followed, my mind racing to catch up with whatever conclusion he'd reached. When we got back to the cabin, Wolfe went straight to the desk and picked up the manuscript we'd brought with us. He'd insisted on bringing it along. He flipped to the final chapter, the one I hadn't read yet, and found the passage he was looking for. The 7th betrayal, he read aloud, is the worst kind. It's not the betrayal of business or friendship or even love. It's the betrayal of understanding. When someone sees all of you, your pain, your anger, your desperate need for meaning, and uses it to destroy you. When they take your confession and make it a weapon, that's the betrayal that breaks everything. That's the weight that cannot be lifted. He looked up at me. The 7th person on the list isn't a publisher, or agent, or former friend. The seventh person is whoever has this manuscript, whoever is reading it, whoever is following it. Us, I said, or the person who ensured we would receive it. The person who understood Blackwood well enough to know exactly what he'd written and exactly how it could be used. Wolfe's eyes were blazing. We're not hunting a murderer, Archie. We're hunting someone who's been hunting us from the very beginning, and they're using Blackwood's words to lead us exactly where they want us to go. Dr. Vance, I said. She had access to all of Blackwood's thoughts. She knew his plans. She could have taken the manuscript before he died. Or she could have been the one who drove him to suicide in the first place, and now she's cleaning up everyone who knew the truth about it. The sound of cars approaching made us all turn. Through the window I saw two vehicles pulling up, Detective Morris from Connecticut, and behind him a New York police car. And getting out of the NYPD vehicle, looking terrified and exhausted, was Lillian Ashford. "Thank God," she said when she saw us. "They told me you were here. Mr. Wolfe, something's happened. Dr. Vance called me this morning. She said she needed to see me urgently. She said she had information about Jonathan's death. She wants to meet me here, at the cabin, tonight." Wolfe and I exchanged a look. "Then tonight," Wolfe said, "we'll give her exactly what she wants, a meeting and a revelation." By nightfall, the cabin had been transformed into a trap. Detective Morris had brought two officers from Connecticut State Police. Inspector Kramer, somehow alerted to the situation, probably by Saul, following Wolfe's instructions, had arrived from New York with two detectives of his own. The cabin was now surrounded by law enforcement, all of them hidden in the woods, all of them waiting. Inside, Wolfe had arranged the space like a stage. Lillian Ashford sat in a chair near the fireplace, visible through the windows. I was positioned by the door, out of sight but ready. Fritz was in the kitchen with the dogs, keeping them calm and quiet. The only dog in the main room was Loyal. He lay at Lillian's feet, his presence both comfort and protection. Wolfe himself sat in the shadows, in the same chair where Jonathan Blackwood had presumably spent his final hours. In his hands was the manuscript, open to the final chapter. "She'll be here soon," Morris said from his position by the window. "Her car was spotted 10 minutes ago, heading up the mountain road." "Good," Wolfe said. "When she arrives, let her enter. Let her see Miss Ashford. Let her feel that she's in control." "And then?" Kramer asked. He'd been furious when he arrived, demanding explanations, but Wolfe had talked him through the theory with such precision that even Kramer's skepticism had crumbled. "Then I talk," Wolfe said simply. "And she either confesses or reveals herself through denial. Either way, we'll have our truth." Headlights swept across the cabin windows. A car door closed. Footsteps on the porch. Dr. Helen Vance knocked once, then opened the door without waiting for an answer. She was wearing dark clothes, practical and unremarkable. Her face was composed, professional, showing just the right amount of concern. "Lillian," she said, stepping inside. "Thank God you're here. I was so worried when you didn't answer your phone." "I'm here," Lillian said. Her voice was steady, but I could see her hands shaking. "You said you had information about Jonathan?" "I do. I've been going through my notes from our sessions, and I found something that changes everything." Dr. Vance sat down across from Lillian, her body language open and warm. "I think I know who killed him." "Do you?" Wolfe's voice came from the shadows, and Dr. Vance jumped like she'd been shocked. "Who?" "Nero Wolfe. And before you ask why I'm here, let me explain that I've been expecting you. We've been expecting you, because you're not here to share information, Dr. Vance. You're here to complete a mission." Dr. Vance's face went blank. Not surprised, blank. The professional warmth vanished like a mask removed. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Of course you do. You're an intelligent woman, a skilled psychiatrist, and you've committed 5 murders with remarkable precision, each one disguised as something innocent. You thought you were following Jonathan Blackwood's plan, but you weren't. You were completing your own. That's insane." "Is it?" Wolfe leaned forward, his face catching the light from the fire. "Let me tell you a story, Dr. Vance. It begins 3 years ago, when Jonathan Blackwood became your patient. He was troubled, angry, feeling betrayed by the publishing world. You listened. You empathized. You helped him process his feelings of abandonment and rage. You were exactly what he needed. That's what psychiatrists do." "Yes, but you did more than that. You encouraged him. You validated his anger. You helped him identify everyone who'd wronged him. And when he started talking about writing it all down, about creating a manuscript that would expose them all, you urged him on. You told him it was healthy, cathartic, a way to reclaim his power. Dr. Vance's eyes flickered toward the door, measuring distance.
Don't,
Kramer said from his position. We have officers surrounding the cabin. You're not leaving. Wolfe continued as if there'd been no interruption. Blackwood wrote his manuscript. He poured everything into it, his anger, his hurt, his need for revenge, and he showed it to you, didn't he, in your sessions. He read passages to you. He asked for your professional opinion on whether he'd captured the psychology correctly. Doctor-patient confidentiality prevents me from discussing. Jonathan Blackwood is dead, Wolfe said flatly. Your confidentiality died with him, and we have his journals, Dr. Vance. We found them here, in this cabin. He wrote about you, about how you were the only one who understood him, how you encouraged him to complete his work. Those were your words, weren't they? Complete his work. Silence. Then, he was suicidal. I was trying to give him purpose. You were grooming him. You saw in his manuscript not a healing exercise, but a blueprint. A list of people who'd betrayed him. People who, in your judgment, deserved punishment. And you started killing them. Prove it. Oh, I intend to. You see, you made several mistakes. Small ones, but fatal. First, you had access to all your victims. Marcus Hale, the agent who dropped Blackwood, was also your patient. You knew he'd just had his car serviced. You knew about his bad brakes. Easy enough to make them worse. Dr. Vance's face remained impassive. Grace Kimball, the critic, was your patient as well. You knew she drank too much. You knew her stairs were steep. A suggestion during therapy, a carefully planted fear about falling, a mild sedative in her system that night. All it took was one push. You're guessing. Patricia Delacourt, Blackwood's ex-wife, also your patient. Ironic, isn't it? She came to you to deal with guilt about how she'd treated Jonathan, and you helped her with that guilt by stopping her heart. Digitalis is easy to obtain for someone with your credentials, and in proper doses, it mimics a natural heart attack perfectly. This is absurd. Theodore Brennan, the publisher, not your patient, but you knew him through Randall Pierce, you had access to Pierce's house, you had access to Pierce's social circle, and you knew Brennan was depressed, isolated, vulnerable, easy enough to befriend him, to offer comfort, to be there on his worst night, to type that note while he was incapacitated, to stage a suicide that everyone would believe. Dr. Vance stood up. I'm leaving. This is harassment. Sit down, Kramer said. He'd moved to block the door, his hand on his service weapon. We're not done. And finally, Randall Pierce, Wolfe said, your patient, your lover, the one person who might have figured out what you were doing. You drugged him. We found the sedatives in the wine glass, by the way. Toxicology will confirm it. You waited until he was compliant, suggestible. Then you staged his suicide, using his own computer to type the note, his own body to complete the scene. But you made one mistake. What mistake? You left the note timed to send in the morning. Randall Pierce was a night person. His computer logs show he never worked in the morning. He wrote in the evening, late into the night. If he'd actually written that suicide note, it would have been sent immediately, not scheduled for morning delivery. That one detail betrays the whole construction. Dr. Vance's composure was cracking. I could see it in the way her hands clenched, in the way her eyes darted around the room looking for escape. Why? Lillian asked suddenly. Why did you do this? Jonathan was your patient. You were supposed to help him, not use his pain to justify murder. Dr. Vance looked at her, and for the first time, I saw real emotion in her face. Contempt. Because they deserved it, she said simply. Every one of them. They destroyed a brilliant man. They took someone who could have been one of the great American writers, and they crushed him with their pettiness, their cowardice, their obsession with profit over art. Jonathan knew it. He wrote it all down, and someone needed to make them pay. So you appointed yourself executioner, Wolfe said. I appointed myself justice, which is more than any of you did. You sit in your comfortable brownstone, solving cases for money, pretending to care about truth, but you don't care about real justice, about the systemic cruelty of an industry that destroys artists for not being commercial enough, about the casual way people betray each other and face no consequences. She was breathing hard now, her professional mask completely gone. Jonathan understood. He wrote it all down. The weight of loyalty. Do you know what that means? It means that being loyal costs something. It requires sacrifice. It requires action. It requires murder, I asked. It requires holding people accountable. And yes, sometimes that means they have to die, because some betrayals are unforgivable. And what about Jonathan himself? Wolfe asked softly. Did you kill him too? The question hung in the air like smoke. Dr. Vance's face went very still. No, she said finally. Jonathan killed himself. I tried to stop him. I came here that night, after he called me. I found him with the gun. He said he'd finished his work, that the manuscript was complete, and now he could rest. I begged him not to do it, but he did it anyway, while I watched, and I couldn't stop him. But you could use his death, Wolfe said. You could take his manuscript. He'd given you a copy, hadn't he? Trusted you with it. And you could turn it into exactly what you wanted, a justification for removing everyone who'd failed him. I made his death mean something. I gave him the revenge he deserved, but was too weak to take himself. You betrayed him, Lillian said, standing up. Loyal rose with her, a low growl building in his chest. You took his pain, his art, his confession, and you turned it into murder. You're the seventh betrayal, Doctor. You're the one the manuscript warned about, the one who sees all of you and uses it to destroy you. Dr. Vance laughed. It was a terrible sound, empty and cold. I'm not the betrayal. I'm the loyal one. I'm the only one who cared enough to act. You're delusional, Kramer said, and you're under arrest for 5 counts of murder. The officers moved in then, surrounding Dr. Vance. She didn't resist. She just stood there, her face blank again, as if she'd retreated back into herself. But before they led her out, she looked at Wolfe. You think you've won. You think you've solved the case. But you haven't understood anything. Loyalty isn't about following rules. It's about being willing to sacrifice everything for what you believe in. Jonathan understood that, and so do I. No, Wolfe said quietly. Jonathan understood that loyalty is about trust, not violence, about being present, not destroying. The dog knew that. He gestured at Loyal, who watched the scene with calm, intelligent eyes. Animals understand loyalty in ways we've forgotten. They don't betray. They don't rationalize cruelty. They simply stay, simply love, simply serve. Jonathan Blackwood died, knowing that the only truly loyal being in his life was a dog who couldn't even speak. That was his final truth, and you perverted it. Dr. Vance said nothing. They led her out into the night, into a police car, into whatever justice system we have for people who commit murder in the name of loyalty. We stayed at the cabin that night. Wolfe declared it necessary for contemplation, which meant he didn't want to drive back to New York in the dark. Fritz prepared a simple meal from provisions we'd brought, and we ate in silence around the fireplace. Lillian Ashford had been driven back to the city under police protection, though she was no longer in danger. The case was closed. Dr. Helen Vance would face trial for 5 murders, with enough evidence to convict her multiple times over. The wine glass, the computer logs, the timeline, the access, all of it pointed to her guilt. But something was bothering Wolfe. I could see it in the way he sat, staring into the fire, his fingers drumming on the arm of his chair. What is it? I finally asked. He didn't answer immediately. The dogs had settled around the room, Caesar and Mars flanking his chair, Apollo and Diana by the windows, Minerva near Fritz in the kitchen, and Loyal, as always, between me and Wolfe, watching both of us. The manuscript, Wolfe said finally. The final chapter. I've been thinking about it. What about it? Jonathan Blackwood wrote that the 7th betrayal was the betrayal of understanding. He wrote it before he died, before Dr. Vance began her killing spree, which means he knew what she would do. You think he wanted her to kill them? No, I think he feared she would, and I think that's why he set up this entire scenario. The manuscript sent to me, the breadcrumbs, the trail of evidence. He wanted someone to stop her, to prevent the 7th betrayal from being completed. But we did stop her. Did we, or did we simply arrive at the conclusion he intended? Dr. Vance killed 5 people following his manuscript, but the manuscript itself was evidence. Proof of motive, proof of planning, proof of exactly what Blackwood feared would happen. He turned his own work into the rope that would hang his killer. I thought about that. So the whole thing was a trap. For her. For her. And for us. He knew I would investigate. He knew I would find the patterns. He knew I would come here, to this cabin, and discover the truth. He orchestrated every move, even after his death. That's not loyalty, Archie. That's manipulation. Brilliant manipulation. But manipulation nonetheless. You sound like you admire him. I pity him. A man so obsessed with betrayal that he couldn't see he was creating it. He pushed Dr. Vance, consciously or not, toward the very actions he feared. He gave her the list, the justifications, the philosophical framework, and then he killed himself, knowing she would complete his revenge. Wolfe shook his head. That's not loyalty. That's using someone's love as a weapon. Fritz came over with beer for Wolfe, and coffee for me. We drank in silence for a while. Then Wolfe spoke again, softer this time. The dog understood better than any of them. Loyal. Both loyals, the one who died, and the one who lived. Justice was buried here, with dignity and care, by a man who'd lost everything but still honored his friend. And our loyal survived because Blackwood made sure he would. Fed him, kept him safe, released him before the end. The dog was the only one Blackwood truly protected, the only one who received his actual loyalty, not his version of it. I looked at Loyal, who was watching Wolfe with those knowing eyes. Maybe that's the whole point. Maybe Blackwood finally figured out what real loyalty meant, and that's why he saved the dog. Not to manipulate anyone, not to prove anything, just because it was right. Perhaps. Wolfe reached down and rested his hand on Loyal's head. The dog leaned into the touch, a gesture of perfect trust. Loyalty is simpler than we make it. It's not about grand gestures or elaborate revenge. It's about being there, about staying, about choosing, every day to remain faithful even when it costs you. Like leaving your brownstone to solve a case, I said. He gave me a look. I didn't want to come here. But you did, for the case, for the client, for the truth. And for him, Wolfe's hand was still on Loyal's head. I owed it to Jonathan Blackwood to finish what he started. Not the revenge, but the exposure of truth. He saved this dog. The least I could do was honor that by ensuring justice was actually served. We sat there for a long time, the fire burning down, the night deepening outside. Eventually, Fritz retired to one of the bedrooms, taking Apollo, Minerva, and Diana with him. Caesar and Mars settled into their sleeping positions, one watching the door, one watching the windows, professional to the end. Loyal remained with us, his presence a quiet reminder of everything we'd learned. As dawn began to break over the mountains, Wolfe finally stood. We should go home. There's work to be done, and I've been away from my orchids for far too long. Back to the brownstone, I said. Back to our life, our work, our own forms of loyalty. He looked at me. You're a good assistant, Archie. Better than I probably deserve. And I don't say that often enough. I grinned. Are you getting sentimental in your old age? Absolutely not. I'm stating facts. Now pack the car. I want to be home by lunch, and Fritz needs time to prepare something adequate after this wilderness adventure. I got the dogs loaded, got Wolfe settled in the passenger seat, and took one last look at the cabin. It stood there in the dawn light, weathered and worn, holding its secrets and its ghosts. Then I drove us home. 3 weeks later, Lillian Ashford came to the brownstone for the last time. She looked better, rested, less haunted. The fear had left her eyes, replaced by something quieter. Acceptance, maybe, or understanding. The trial is next month, she told Wolfe. Dr. Vance is pleading not guilty by reason of insanity. Her lawyers are arguing that she was suffering from a delusional disorder, that she genuinely believed she was doing the right thing. She may have been delusional, Wolfe said, but she was also coldly rational in her execution. The jury will see that. I hope so. Lillian paused. I wanted to thank you for solving this, for stopping her. He was trying to warn you, Wolfe said. All of you. The manuscript was a confession and a warning. He knew Dr. Vance was dangerous. He just didn't know how to stop her without exposing his own darkness. Do you think he could have stopped her? If he'd lived? No. I think she would have killed him too, eventually, when he no longer served her purposes. She was using his pain as permission for her own violence. That's not love. That's not loyalty. That's parasitism. Lillian nodded slowly. I've been reading his early work. The novels he wrote before everything went wrong, before the bitterness set in. They're beautiful, Mr. Wolfe, full of hope and humanity and real understanding of people. He was a good writer once. He was still a good writer at the end. The manuscript proves that. But good writing doesn't excuse bad actions. And his actions, however, indirectly led to 5 deaths. 6, Lillian said quietly. If you count his own. Wolfe was silent for a moment. Then, yes, 6. After Lillian left, Wolfe sat at his desk with the manuscript. He'd kept a copy properly obtained through the police and the estate, and he'd read it through several more times. Now he opened it to the final page, the last lines Jonathan Blackwood ever wrote. In the end, loyalty costs everything. It costs your pride when you admit mistakes. It costs your comfort when you stay instead of leaving. It costs your ego when you put someone else first. But the weight of it, that terrible, beautiful weight, is what makes us human. We carry each other's burdens. We stay in the hard times. We choose again and again to love even when it hurts. I failed at that. I let my pain turn to poison. I let my need for validation become a weapon. I betrayed the people who tried to love me by demanding perfect loyalty while offering none in return. If anyone reads this, know that I understand now. Too late, but I understand. The only one I never betrayed was the dog, and that's because he never asked anything of me except to exist, to be present, to stay. That's the lesson I learned too late. Loyalty is not about grand gestures or perfect devotion. It's about showing up, every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. I'm sorry I couldn't be that person. I'm sorry for what I've done, and for what will be done in my name. I hope someone stops it. I hope someone reads this and understands. The weight of loyalty is lighter than we think, if we're willing to carry it together. Wolfe closed the manuscript and looked at me. He understood, at the end. But understanding and acting are different things. He understood loyalty but couldn't practice it. That's his tragedy. And our lesson, I said. Precisely. The dogs were in their usual positions around the office. Caesar by the desk, Mars by the door, Apollo at the window, Minerva by the bookshelves, Diana on her spot on the rug, and Loyal as always, between us, watching with those intelligent, honest eyes. Wolfe reached down and scratched behind Loyal's ears. The dog's tail thumped contentedly on the floor. They understand something we forget, Wolfe said. That loyalty isn't complicated. It's simple. You choose someone, and you stay. You don't keep score. You don't demand perfection. You just stay. Is that your way of saying you appreciate having me around? I asked with a grin. Don't be absurd. You're annoying, insubordinate, and far too cheerful in the mornings. But yes, Archie, I appreciate having you around. You stay, even when I'm difficult. That's, valuable. Wow, 2 compliments in 1 month. Should I be worried? Are you dying? I'm expressing what Jonathan Blackwood should have expressed to the people in his life. Before it was too late. Before his silence and his anger drove them away and him to despair. Wolfe paused. We carry weights, all of us. The weight of work, of responsibility, of trying to do right in a world that often rewards wrong. But we carry them better when we carry them together. That's what loyalty really means. Not perfection, just presence. I didn't say anything. Sometimes Wolfe surprises me with his depth. And when he does, the best response is silence. Fritz brought in lunch, a beautiful sole meuniere with fresh vegetables from the market. We ate quietly, the afternoon sun streaming through the bulletproof windows, the dogs at rest, the case closed. It was an ordinary moment, comfortable, familiar, safe. And I realized that's what the whole case had been about. Not the murders, not the manuscript, not even justice. It was about recognizing that ordinary moments of staying, of being present, of choosing each other day after day, those were the moments that mattered. Those were what loyalty actually looked like. Wolfe finished his meal and pushed back from the table. I'll be in the plant rooms until 6. There's a Loelia purpurata that requires attention. You'll hold the fort? Always do. Yes, he said, pausing at the door. You always do. That's the point. He left, and I heard his footsteps on the elevator, heading up to his orchids. The dogs resettled themselves. The brownstone hummed with its usual quiet life. I sat at my desk and pulled out the file on the case, the one I'd been compiling for Wolfe's records. The whole investigation, documented and organized. The manuscript, the victims, the evidence, the resolution, everything in its proper place. At the bottom of the file, I added one final note. The weight of loyalty. Case closed. Lesson learned. Loyalty isn't about perfection or grand gestures. It's about showing up, every day, especially the hard days. We're better at it than we think, as long as we remember to try. I filed it away, then looked at Loyal, who'd moved to sit beside my desk. We're good at this. You and me and Wolfe and all of us. I told him. Staying, being loyal, carrying the weight together. Your namesake would be proud. Loyal's tail wagged, and his eyes held that perfect understanding that dogs have, the kind that says everything without words. Outside, New York City carried on with its chaos and noise, but inside the brownstone at 918 West 35th Street, there was peace, there was order, there was loyalty. The simple kind, the kind that matters, the kind worth every weight it carries. 6 months later, I found Wolfe in the plant rooms, examining a particularly temperamental orchid that had refused to bloom for 3 seasons. Spring was coming on strong, and the glass walls of the room were bright with April sun. Mail came, I said, holding up an envelope, from the Connecticut Department of Corrections. Wolfe looked up. Dr. Vance? Her lawyer. She's been convicted on all counts. Life without parole. The insanity defense didn't fly, but she's written a letter, addressed to you. Wolfe set down his tools and took the envelope. He opened it carefully, read in silence, then handed it to me. The letter was short. Mr. Wolfe, you were right about everything, except one thing. I did love Jonathan. I loved him enough to honor what he couldn't do himself. That's not parasitism. That's partnership. You live with your dogs, your assistant, your orchids. You've built a life of controlled loyalty, where everyone stays in their place and serves your comfort. But that's not real loyalty either. That's convenience disguised as virtue. Real loyalty requires sacrifice. It requires action. It requires being willing to destroy what corrupts the things you love. I don't regret what I did. I regret that I couldn't make you understand why it mattered. Helen Vance. I looked at Wolfe. She's completely unrepentant. Of course she is. She's convinced herself that murder is a form of love. That's the ultimate corruption of loyalty, turning it into justification for harm. He took the letter back and tore it into small pieces, dropping them into the waste bin. She learned nothing. She'll die in prison learning nothing. You think she's right about us? About the brownstone being controlled loyalty? Wolfe considered that. Perhaps there's truth in it. I do prefer control. I do structure my life to minimize disruption. But the people who stay in this house, you, Fritz, Saul, Theodore, even Kramer in his way, you stay because you choose to, not because I've manipulated you into serving my needs. That's the distinction she can't see. Choice versus compulsion. Freedom versus control. And the dogs? The dogs stay because we feed them, shelter them, and treat them with respect. They stay because that's what dogs do when they're loved properly. There's no manipulation in it, just mutual benefit and affection. I nodded. So we're good people after all. Don't be ridiculous. Good is a spectrum, not a destination. We try, we fail sometimes. We try again. That's all anyone can do. He returned to his orchid. Now leave me alone. This cattleya is being obstinate, and I need to convince it to bloom. I left him to his flowers and went back downstairs. The dogs were in their various positions, the same positions they'd held for months now, comfortable and familiar. Loyal looked up as I entered, his tail wagging. We're doing okay, I told him. Not perfect, but okay, and that's good enough. His tail wagged harder. In the kitchen, Fritz was preparing dinner, something that smelled of garlic and butter and probably cost too much, but would taste like heaven. In the office, the phone was ringing with what would surely be another client, another case, another chance to prove that truth and loyalty and staying present still mattered in a world that often forgot. The brownstone stood firm against the New York afternoon, bulletproof and secure, full of living things and honest relationships, and the kind of loyalty that comes from choosing, every day, to show up and do the work. That's not perfection. That's not even particularly heroic. But it's real, and in the end, being real is all loyalty really requires. The weight of it is heavy sometimes, but carried together among friends and dogs and honest work, it's bearable. More than bearable. It's right.